I've always been interested in the Paleolithic just as being the time when humans became human, and I think of it as a science fictional question myself. When you try to imagine what humans could become in the future, you have to think about how we became what we are now. And it just always struck me as an interesting period, like historical, but before. So it resembles certain science fiction scenarios where human beings without very many resources have a forbidding alien icy planet that they have to get by on, except it was the real situation. I've been a backpacker all my life, spent as much time as I can in the high Sierra of California, and when they pulled the Iceman out of the ice on the glacier between Italy and Austria, this was 1991, he had all of his gear with him that had been frozen and preserved because of the freezing. And all of his gear was just like our gear. And I thought that was intriguing. Then the Chauvet Cave was the discovery that really gave me the story. The cave is twice as old as Lascaux and Altamira. The paintings are just as beautiful and accomplished. 32,000 years old, the Neanderthals were still alive, and it struck me as a perfect scenario to try to write up the story of the people who painted that cave, so that I had my opportunity. It came in as I was writing it. The third wind, the narrative of this book, I can't quite define. I'm not sure. I didn't want to have to be sure what it was, the voice, the teller of this story, and at a certain point in writing the book, I began to understand that pre-literate cultures were different. Simply, their consciousness was different. Even though same DNA, same brains, without writing, you remember things differently, you have a different relationship to the world and to stories, and memory is really important. So then the third wind, as you know, what comes after the second wind, when you're really exhausted, began to speak. Maybe I was in that state of exhaustion, but once that voice began to speak, I realized I had a different narrator. It's not like my other narrators, it's not like me. It's talking, not writing, which makes a difference to the sentences and to the flow. And it was a beautiful discovery. And so I decided, let's not be too analytical here. Let's just let the flow happen, let the voice tell the story that seems to be telling it. So for me, it was like the great gift of the book. If you pay close enough attention to the book, to the story in it, then it teaches you things that you didn't know when you began. And that was definitely one of them. My research was basically three parts. The first part was books, as usual. I had collected a couple of bookshelves of books on the Paleolithic period and the cave art. Then a number of archaeologists and anthropologists helped me when I asked them direct questions about that period or about early peoples or about, there are some anthropologists who have been working with tribes that are still alive on this planet that don't have writing, that are pre-literate. And so that was extremely interesting to ask questions and have them review the manuscripts. And then the third part was just my own snow camping experiences. We go up into the Sierras on snowshoes and spend time up there trying to stay dry and warm and comfortable, usually in the late winter or early spring when the snow is settled and there's not chance of avalanche. But for about maybe 10 or 15 years when I was snow camping, I would be thinking about this book and imagining what it would be like if, you know, if you never came back down out of the mountains to your shower and your home, but were up there all the time. You know, what would that feel like? And it would be very different than backpacking, but at least I've had those experiences of being in the snow. I've had a lot of luck with my teachers. I've been very lucky in that I've been taught by some extraordinary people, and so I feel like that direct transmission, the kind of master-apprentice relationship that is in the book of the old shaman trying to teach the young shaman. There's some echoes of relationships, of people. I mean, I just watched my two boys go through their teenage years and got to pay attention to that and try to remember my own. So for sure, a lot of what I've seen in this world, you know, we're the same people. That's the thing. We have a different materials in our technologies and different abilities, virtual or augmented abilities, writing itself, which is really the big one. But since we're the same people, I felt confident that I could just do the same kind of characterizations I always do, and those are always learning from the people around me. I feel like writing novels is really a matter of letting other voices speak, of being like a telephone operator back in the 40s, of plugging in different voices that you hear and trying to just channel them and get out of the way. It's not self-expression in the way that some people might think. It's more being a channeler and a collector of community voices. The interesting thing about that period is we really only have the stone and bone tips of their tools. We have the Iceman's kit, but we don't have much evidence of their lives. And we have the cave paintings, but those are mostly of the animals that they obviously loved and paid close attention to. So in short, there's just not much evidence as to how they lived, and it's all by inference to the early cultures that were still alive and working as early cultures in the 19th century when the first anthropologists and ethnologists studied them. I tried to stick very close to what we know would be right, and yet a few times I took risks thinking that this culture was perhaps 10 or 20,000 years old and they were the same DNA as us, just as smart as us. They didn't have writing, but they were paying really close attention as to how to be more comfortable. So I'm positive they had snowshoes. I bet they had walking boots for when they sprained an ankle. They could make it out of bone and leather and wood, and it's the obvious thing to do. I bet they had fireworks, looking at a fire every night. If they threw in some minerals by accident that happened to burn blue or purple or green, it would be unusual enough they might track down why it happened and then kind of collect those minerals to toss into a fire just to give themselves something fun to look at. Because a fire every night for 10,000 years, you're going to notice things like that. Now, there's no evidence of that. We simply don't have in the archaeological record any signs of any of those things. And yet, by inference and just by pure speculation, I'm pretty positive. And because it was a novel and not a work of archaeology or science, I was free to say these things, which I think most archaeologists would agree with, but they need to stick to what they can prove or else they aren't doing science anymore. So this is the great beauty of fiction, where you can just follow your inferences and say it just has to be true.